Hey everybody, and welcome back to my channel. I am here to let you guys know about all the books that I read in 2022. I read a total of 49 books. I didn't really have a goal just because I didn't start in January. I technically started it at the end of April, and so it's just over half the year, so I didn't really want to make too crazy of a goal. I wanted to see where things went, and 49 books is amazing. Of those 49 books, I read 15 fiction, crime, thriller, mystery books, 15 nonfiction like self-help and psychology or religious books. I read 10 romance books, which I'm surprised that number wasn't higher given the Colleen Hoover situation I had going on. I read 3 memoirs. I read 6 contemporary / historical literary fiction books. So let's get into all the books that I read this year. I'll briefly go over the genre that the book is in and then just kind of give a quick synopsis so this book isn't forever long, but let's get into it. The first book that kind of sparked my reading for the year, that got me out of years long of a reading slump, was Colleen Hoover's It Ends With Us. Now I know there's kind of mixed reviews on this book. I loved it. I loved how the story was written. Now, obviously there's trigger warnings for every book. So I read this in April. It was the one and only book that I read in April, and this is what got everything going. Starting off with May, I read Atomic Habits by James Clear. Now I read this book every single year. Now typically in the beginning of the year, but we picked this one up in May of last year, and I love it. Tiny changes, remarkable results, an easy and proven way to build good habits and break bad ones. So obviously this is a self-help, psychological nonfiction book. Also in May, I read Maybe Someday by Colleen Hoover. So obviously I got on the Colleen train right after the first one. This one was not my favorite. I think I rated it like 3 stars. It was an interesting concept, but it was too like, okay, that really wouldn't happen kind of thing in my head. And so I had a hard time connecting with the story and with some of the characters. But yeah, so this was about a 3-star book for me, obviously in the romance category. I think it's safe to say that most of Colleen Hoover's books are romance. There's a few that are like mystery thriller, like Verity, and a few others in her collection, but most of hers are going to be romance. Also in May, I read one of my favorite memoirs, 5-star book, Finding Me. This was by Viola Davis. The best book, hands down. I mean, and it took it over the edge for me because I listened to it as an audiobook and she narrates it. Honestly, the best experience I've had. I would say that's the top of the year for me as far as experience and content of reading the book. So that was an amazing book. Another book that I read in May is And Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell. It is a fiction, crime, thriller, mystery kind of book. I rated that 4 stars. It was a good story. I would say 4.5 stars. It was a good story plot, something different that I hadn't really, I don't know, read before, and it kind of got my wheels turning. Typically I can like figure out what's gonna happen or see where they're gonna go with stuff. Like I had no clue what was gonna unfold with this story, and so I really enjoyed reading it. The 4th book that I read in May was This Working Life by Lisa Leong. It was a self-help book, a nonfiction self-help book. I rated that about 3 stars, I believe. And the last book that I read in May was The How of Happiness by Sonia, can't say her last name. And this was recommended to me actually by my CPA, which was kind of random. But it is a nonfiction self-help book that I rated maybe 3 stars. Moving on to the month of June, the first book I read was an Audible book called Young Rich Widows. It was a really good story. I think I rated this 4.5 or 5 stars. It was in the fiction, crime, thriller, mystery category, and it was a good listen. I love when Audible books have like multiple voice actors to it, and it gives the story a really dynamic approach, and I just enjoyed the story. It had a nice twist at the end. There was actually a girl with my name in it, and anyways, I enjoyed the story. The second book that I read was Tired as the F Word by Caroline Dooner. This was a nonfiction self-help book. It was okay. I rated this 3 stars just because, I don't know, maybe it was just her style of writing, but I just didn't enjoy it as much. I think I also listened to this one as an audiobook as well, and yeah, it was just okay. The third book I read was Where the Crawdads Sing, and that was in the historical fiction and mystery category. This I rated 5 stars. I listened to this on Audible, so it was a better experience for me, I believe, than if I would have read it, because a lot of people will say like, oh, this book is so slow. And yes, the story is a bit slow, but one thing, when I listen to Audible, I listen to it at like 1.5 speed, so it speeds things up naturally, and it just makes the experience a bit different when you're listening to it. And so I enjoyed it. It was 5 stars for me, I believe, because of those factors. If I probably would have read it in a physical book, I don't know if I would have enjoyed it as much. The story is great, but I feel like the experience would have taken away from the story if I would have read it, if that makes sense. The fourth book that I read is Feeding the Soul by Miss Tabitha Brown. This was just like a fun, joyous memoir of hers. It's an autobiography. And it has a lot of good advice. It even has recipes in here. I think I rated this 4 stars, and we all love Tab. It was a little disjointed, but I enjoyed learning more about Tabitha, so there's that. The 5th book that I read in June was Verity by Colleen Hoover. Now this was a book that this was a book unlike any other book, especially for Colleen Hoover, because like I said, she does a lot of romance, and so this introduced me to the thriller, romance, mystery. I mean, it was just a fusion of goodness for me. I really enjoyed the story. The plot was a little interesting. I don't really particularly like the twist at the end. If you guys know, you know. If you know, you know. About team manuscript or letter. It's just like, why'd you have to add that? Why'd you have to do that? Anyways, but the story was nice and I enjoyed it. I think I rated this 5 stars. I thought it was a 5-star read. The 6th book that I read in June was called Liar by K.L. Slater. K.L. Slater does a lot of fiction and like thriller fiction books, and so I rated this book 3 stars. I'm not even 100% sure of what the plot and storyline is anymore. It was very forgettable. The last book that I read in June was When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole. I wanted to like this book more than I did, but I rated it 3.5 stars. Yeah, this is a psychological thriller and fiction book, and there was a lot more underneath the surface of this story, but I didn't particularly like how it all came together in the actual story. It's like, okay, maybe a lot of points were made and things like that, but I don't know. I felt like in some areas it was a little, the writing was a little juvenile, and the story didn't come together the way I wanted it to. But anyways, it was an interesting read. I would recommend it. It was just a 3-star read for me. 3.5-star read for me. Moving on to July. Now, you guys can judge me if you want, but this was a Colleen Hoover month for me. After Verity, so after It Ends With Us and Verity, we had that Maybe Someday in between, but after those two had kind of given me the proof that I needed for Colleen, I went all in July. Okay, I picked up a whole stack and read maybe like 4 or 5 of her books. So judge me if you want. There's like the Colleen Hoover hater. It's 0 to 100 with Colleen Hoover. Either you love her or you hate her. And so here we go. The first book I read in July was Ugly Love. This was the only 5-star read for me in the month of July. I just enjoyed the story. I connected with it and it was well written. All Your Perfects. I enjoyed it because as a married person, I connected with a lot of what was going on in here, and it was very real. But it was kind of slow for me, I'm not gonna lie. So I rated this 4 stars. Everything, I think really all of her books were 4 stars for me this month, but I enjoyed the realness of this just because I could connect with certain things. But like I said, a little too slow for me. It was a little too slow burn for me, and for that reason it was 4 stars. The next one I read was Reminders of Him. I gave this 4 stars. I'm trying to find the words. I like the story. It was just okay. I like the story. I just felt like a lot of I felt like this book could have been shorter. That's what I'll say. I felt like it could have been shorter, and a lot of the stuff, a lot of the content was drawn out in the story. I'll say that and leave it there. The 4th Colleen Hoover book that I read was Confess. I thought this was a cute concept. So I would say this was 4.5 stars. A lot of people don't like this one, but I thought it was cute, and so 4.5 stars for me. The 5th book that I read in July was an Audible book called Be Well, and it was by a psychiatrist or a psychotherapist, and it was a good book. It was a 5-star read for me. It was just one of those reminders that like mental health is important, not only in the Black community, but just period. And I enjoyed learning about some of the mental health disorders and how to approach them from, you know, the person struggling or the person, you know, in that person's life. It was just a dynamic and informative audiobook, so 5 stars for me. The 6th book I read was A Week to Change Your Life. This was an interesting book. I like learning new concepts and new things. I don't know if I 100% believe it, but just to give you guys like a sneak peek, if you want to pick this up and read it, it's saying that you have a 7-day cycle depending on the day that you were born. Now, we all know about like circadian rhythms and other rhythms that our bodies go through. But this is talking about a 7-day rhythm, like a weekly cycle and rhythm that your body and that your life flows through, and how you can use food and activities and stuff to kind of work with your personal rhythm depending on what day of the week you were born. I thought that was interesting. I don't 100% subscribe to it, but it was informative, and so I gave this 3.5 stars. The 7th book that I read in the month of July is We're All the Same in the Dark. That was a fiction, thriller, mystery genre book. I rated this book 4 stars. The last book I read in July is The Secret. Now, don't everybody come for me at once. This is a love it or hate it book. It's a lot about manifestation. Once again, like with the Week to Change Your Life book, I don't fully subscribe to a lot of different like thoughts. I don't know how to describe it, but I enjoy learning about new things, and I enjoy reading things to where I can like decide what I want to take from it and what I want to leave with it. You know what I mean? And so this was one of those books. It was one of those books that reminded me of The Power of the Mind. And I kind of took it from that perspective. And it really allowed me to change my thinking about certain things. But like I said, take it for what it's worth. If you're not really subscribed to all of that, it may not be for you. But I rated this 4 stars. Moving on to the month of August. August was a struggle for me. I only read 3 books. The first one I read was Girl Wash Your Face by Rachel Hollis. I gave this 3 stars. It was cute. I don't really care for the lady's story. Rachel in particular, like she goes through her experiences and stuff like that and lessons that she learned. I appreciated the lessons, didn't care for how she got to those lessons like in her life, if that makes sense. It's just like, girl, your life. Anyway, so there were some gems. I picked those out and then left the rest for what it was. And so that's why I gave this a 3 star. It was a nonfiction self-help sort of religious book. And yeah, the second book I read in August was The Girl on the Train by Paula Hawkins. This was a fiction crime thriller mystery book, and I enjoyed it. It was a bit slow, I'm not gonna lie. And the only reason I finished it was because I wanted to watch the movie on Amazon. I'm not gonna lie to y'all. This book was a bit tough to get through. It was a bit slow. The story was okay, and I gave this 3 stars. August, spoiler alert, August was 3 books, 3 stars each. Every book that I read was a 3-star book, and yeah, it was kind of rough. The last book that I read in August was Tell Her Story. It was an Audible book that I listened to, another fiction thriller, and gave that one 3 stars. I can't even fully tell you what that story was about. Very forgettable as well. Okay, so we are in September, and the first book that I read in September was Crying in H Mart. Oh my goodness, this was my first, well, I guess Tabitha's book was a memoir, but this was like the first memoir that I fell in love with. It was just so good. This was a 5-star read. I think September was really good for reading, but that was the first one to kick it off. 5 stars. The second one that I read was Everyday Magic by Maddie James. I follow her on Instagram and love her content. It's so digestible, so practical, and I love it. And so the cover is beautiful. I love the way she puts her life and her lessons into this beautiful masterpiece. I gave this a 4.5 stars. The third book that I read was Get Out of Your Head, bars, by Jenny Allen. The subtitle is Stopping the Spiral of Toxic Thoughts. You guys, enough said. This is obviously a nonfiction self-help book. It's also under the religious category as well. I love how she breaks things down in this book, from like where the negative thoughts, how the negative thoughts flow, and how to reverse that, to reverse engineer like positive thinking, and like it said, stopping the spiral of toxic thoughts. Like, it is just so beautifully organized and like practically put out there. It's 5 stars, 100%. And so I actually picked up another book from her that's on my TBR for 2023. So yes, the 4th book I read, it's along the same vein. It's Embrace Your Almost by Jordan Lee Dooley. It's another self-help book, and it says find clarity and contentment in the in-betweens, not quites and unknowns. Now that is applicable for everybody. Honestly, we all end up in places in our lives where we're not quite sure, and I think this was a good book. I gave it 4 stars. Because also there's some of her personal life storytelling that I don't really resonate with or relate to. And I think that causes kind of like a rift for me when it comes to separating the two. But I love the lessons that she gives, and I think she's a great writer. So 4 stars. The last 3 books that I read were Audible books. The 5th one was 2 of them were short stories by Don Winslow. First of all, I love his style. The first one was The Heron, 5 stars. It was a cute little story. It was kind of like a little fiction crime thriller. I thought it was a really well written story. And the second one was Free Billy. That one was such a cute little romance. It was adorable. Like I said, both of those were short stories, kind of easy to add to my book count. But if you're just going on a short little commute, I would recommend listening to those 2 on Audible. Both 5 stars for me. And then the last one was The Sisters by Dervla. It was an audiobook that I do not recommend and don't care for. I gave it like 2 stars. Next, October was another short month for me. I read 4 books. The first book I read was Red at the Bone by Jacqueline Woodson. It was a contemporary literary fiction book, and I gave that one 3 stars. The second book that I read was Remarkably Bright Creatures. It was one that I listened to on Audible, and it was just a cute story. It was one of those things that I never thought I would enjoy. It was a contemporary fiction as well, and it also added like a magical realism to that genre, and that's the part where I'm just like, I didn't really know that I would enjoy something like this, and I did. I gave it 5 stars. The third book I read was Book Lovers by Emily Henry. This was the first book that I read from her. I have beach read. I need to get people we meet on vacation. This is the first one that I read, and I enjoyed the story. It was cute. I love her writing style. Like, she's so funny and like witty. And I gave this 4 stars, or no, I gave this 4.5 stars. So really good book. I'm excited to read her other ones. The last book that I read was 12 Rules for Life. I actually listened to this one before I bought it, but it was one of those things that I wanted to go through and highlight some things. Some people have an issue with Jordan Peterson. After watching that whole Don't Worry Darling, I kind of watched a lot of videos on how a lot of people feel about Jordan Peterson, and I don't know, I think in a lot of ways we need to cut this man some slack. I think he has a lot of points. I think he's very misunderstood, and you have to take what he says with context to the whole, you know what I mean? But anyways, that's neither here nor there. I enjoyed the book. I gave it 4 stars. Okay guys, we are almost at the end. We are in November now, and the first book that I read in November was Black Girls Must Die Exhausted. This was a contemporary fiction book. It was a good story. It didn't really have like anything that like stood out to me, or any like plot twist or anything crazy like that. It was just a nice story. So 4 stars. I'm looking forward to reading the second book in the series called Black Girls Must Be Magic. The second book that I read in November was The Happiness Project. I did a whole recap on what I read in November, so I'm not gonna take too long on these books. You can go watch that video here. 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. Love, love, love. This was a 5-star romance read for me. Small Great Things by Jodi Picoult. Also another 5-star read, and this one falls into the contemporary fiction category. 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I gave this 3 stars. Last book that I read in November was Maybe Not by Colleen Hoover. And I wish I did not read this, but I gave this one 2 stars. In December, I read 7 books. I traveled a lot, so a lot of these were Audible books. But the first one I read, I literally finished on the first day. I literally finished on the first day of December. This was The Silent Patient by Alex McLadies. It's a fiction thriller mystery book that I rated 5 stars. Now the ending was a little like, okay, why? But I really enjoyed the experience of reading it. I loved his writing style and I was hooked the entire time. So 5 stars for me. The second book that I listened to, this happened over a like a road trip, and so on the way there I listened to Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian McAllister, another fiction thriller mystery book, and y'all, 5 stars. It's a time loop kind of story and I was just hooked the entire time. I played it the entire drive to where I was going, and the twists, the turns, the aha moments, it was just a great story, something totally different than I've ever listened to, and it was a good ending as well. The third one I listened to was When They Find Me. So on the way back from that trip, I listened to When They Find Me, which was another fiction thriller mystery book. I don't know what how the theme of December became thriller crime mystery books, but here we are. That was a 5-star read as well. Lots of twists and turns, but I enjoyed the story. I was hooked the entire time. The 4th book that I read is The Golden Couple by Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pekinen. They are the authors of The Wife Between Us, which I don't have, but I heard a lot about. It comes highly rated as well. So this is The Golden Couple, and it was a great story. I read it on a cabin trip, and I was kind of hooked. Like I think I read it in like a little over a day and a half. It was that good. The ending to me, I gave it 4. I think I gave this 4.5 stars. I gave this 4 stars because the ending to me was a little unbelievable. It was unrealistic. Like, okay, how many connections and coincidences are we gonna have here? So yeah, the ending was a little disappointing, but how we got there, the story, the experience of reading the story was good enough for me. It's the ending that gave it 4 stars, but I would still recommend it 100% because you may enjoy the ending way more than I did. So definitely read this one. The 5th book I read, it's really not even a book. It's kind of just like a little workbook. It's The Essential Enneagram. And I really enjoy learning things about myself and personality. Now, when Myers-Briggs came out, that was a big thing, but this is more of the recent one. So I want to get on board in understanding more about Enneagrams and mine. So this was a cute little read. I'm not going to rate it because, okay. 6th book that I read was called Attached by Amir Levine and Rachel Heller. This book is so good. It dragged me and read me for filth. I'm not gonna lie, but I still enjoyed it because it was that good and that informative. It's definitely a 5-star read, nonfiction, self-help. It says the new science of adult attachment and how it can help you find and keep love. This was one that was just so good, whether you're in a relationship or not. Like it says how it can help you find and keep love, so it applies to so many people, and it was like therapy in a book for me. So I learned a lot and was able to apply a lot in my relationship. So this is definitely a 5-star read and a top recommendation for me. The last book I listened to was Still Life by Lois Penny. It is a fiction crime mystery book as well, and it is the first in her Armand Gamache series, which I told you guys that I am collecting all 18 books in that series, and this one was the hardest one to find, the first book, like a physical book. And so I did listen to this one on Audible, and I rated it 4.5 stars. It was a good story, and so I'm really looking forward to reading the rest of the books in this series, and December was a really good reading month for me. So that was the 49 books that I read in 2022. I am excited because I started, like I said, pretty much in May, and got to read 49 books. So my goal for 2023 is 100 or more. We're doubling it. Okay, tell me how many books you guys read in 2022 and how much you plan to read in 2023. Thank you guys for rocking with me, Rocky, and I will see you guys in my next video.